Welcome back to the continuation of our discussion on backend validation in the Go programming language. So what we want to do now is to complete the final step in our validation process. And so what we want to do in this video is to create the form or to update our form so that in red we display above the form field if something is missing from that field or if the data is too much. And of course, we also want to keep whatever is correct. So I will use a bit of CSS. So I went ahead and I created a static directory, okay, inside UI. So currently UI, let's look at that, ls UI. I currently have a static directory, okay, in addition to the HTML directory. And inside the static directory, I have one file named styles.css, which contains my CSS. And if I look at my CSS file, there's quite a bit of CSS, but I want you to pay attention to the .error class. Okay, so I created this class was created specifically to be able to put that red above the field, above the box, if something is wrong. Okay, and then we want to put a red border around the actual box. So two things. We're going to tell the user with words what is wrong. And secondly, we're going to put a red border around the field that something is wrong with. And of course, I added more CSS to make the form a bit more appealing. So if you're going to use CSS, then obviously it means that I need to update my HTML, my templates. So if I come here, you'll notice that I use the link tag. Again, this is something you all know from your previous web development course. And so I'm going to use href /static /css /styles.css. Now, this will only work if I have my file server. So I went ahead and in main.go, I created a file server. Again, we've seen this before. So all I did was to create a new file server. I stripped it using the strip prefix function, which I have discussed in earlier videos. And then I simply passed it or added it to mux. All right. So now my file server will be able to see the static directory and anything inside the static directory. Okay, so let's move on to the actual work that we need to do. And so we need to take our web form, okay? So our web form has author, category, and quote. So what we want to do is to write some code that allows us to redisplay the data that is correct and to display an error message and a red border around the fields that need to be corrected. And so to do that, I'm going to use the with command in a sense, the with clause that Go templates provides us. So I'm going to go into my first label, author, and what I'm going to do after the label command. Okay, I am going to use curly braces, and I'm going to use the width command. Now the width command, I will explain it. So what I will do, I'm going to check for errors from form. Okay, and what I want is the author key. Now, if there was an error with the author field, then I would have a value associated with the author key. And so what this is saying is, with this simply means if I can find a key value pair, meaning if I look in the map and I find that there is something for author, meaning something is wrong, then I want to do something. And what is that something I want to do? I want to create a new label. Okay, so on the fly, I want to create a new label. And this label will have a class of error. So this label will be in, let's go back to my CSS. This label will be in red, and it will be bold, and it will have a block display. Okay, and so that's what this label will be. Okay, it will have a class of error from the CSS file. And then I will have to say what the label will contain. Well, the label will have the text which comes from the map. Okay, and that's what the dot means. And so let's close my label. Okay, label. All right. And then I have to end this. Okay. So what I'm saying here, this is the gist of it. I will check to see if I can find some error for the author field. If there is an error, then I want to create a new label which will show the error message. And so where does the error message come from? It comes from the value. That's what the dot means. The dot means the value. So I'm going to check for the key, and if there is a value associated with that key, meaning there is an entry in the map, then the dot means I'm going to use the value. Okay, so that's what the width means. The width means if something is there, then this dot will be that thing. All right, so that's the width and the end. Great. Remember, this only works if there's an error, which means that there's something in our errors map. Now, what happens if there are no items? Well, then we need to make sure that whatever was typed in stays there, okay, or is put back in there. And so to do that, I'm simply going to say, well, input, of course, is my text. The name, of course, is author name. But then I want to change and say that the value will be what we need. So it will be form data. Specifically, I want to get space the author underscore name from the post form map. Okay, and then you close that. Okay, so this is all we have so far now. All right, I took the same input box, and I'm going to say the value for this input box will be what is in the post form field. Specifically, I want to get the value associated with author name. Because if you recall, post form is a map and it contains what the user typed in, also as a key value pair. Okay, so let's see how this looks. Let's give this a try. So let's close this. Let's come here and let's see what it looks like. So go run ./cmd/web. Okay, so let me go back. Okay, that works. Let's go to quote. So I'm going to put in a new quote. And so this is what my form looks like with a bit of CSS. All right. Let's put a category of maybe life and a quote of yeah. Okay. And I'm going to leave author blank. Okay. And so you'll notice that I have author, which is correct. And then it says this field cannot be blank with the markings around it. Okay. Now, obviously, notice that category disappeared and quote disappeared. And the answer is because we have not written any code to keep those in. The only thing we wrote was if it's there for author, we keep it. If it's not, we display an error message. So to show you how that works as well, all right, I'm going to put in author. Okay. And then I'm going to leave the rest blank. Okay. All right. And so Jane Suggs is still there. All right. So our approach works. So all we need to do now is to go back and do the same for the remaining fields. All right. So I'm just going to copy this. All right. And then after category, I will now check to see if there are any errors for the category field. All right. So again, author, category, because those are the field, those are the keys that we created in our errors map. Right. So if you remember, we have author, category, and quote. All right. And so we're going to look to see if there's a category in the errors map. Now, if there is, it means that we had an error with category. And so we're going to display the value associated to that, which means what was wrong. And of course, we're going to have text. We're going to have category. But now the value that belongs to that field, okay, will simply be, of course, double quotes. And inside of that, we're going to have the curly braces, form data, and we want to get the associated name. Okay. And the name, of course, is category. Right? So we're going to get in quotes category. All right. And then you're going to close it. And finally, this is important, we're going to close it again. Right? Because remember everything, all these attributes must be in quotes. So value is an attribute, and so it has to be in quotes. All right? Okay. And then let's quickly do the one for the text area. Copy that. And then I'm gonna paste that here. and we're gonna have the quote, right? Display the error message if there is one. But if there isn't any, then I'm gonna go here and right here in between the open text area and the closed text area, I'm going to put my dot form data dot get. And what do I want to get? I want to get quote. Okay. Okay. So we don't use any quotes because it's outside the tags. Okay, it's outside the tags. Okay. So this looks like something we can work with. So let's save this and let's give it a try. Okay, so let me make sure everything works. So let me go back. Okay, so let me go to quote. All right, so I will put in category. Well, I'll leave category blank. Let's say my quote is, does this work? Okay, and so we're gonna give this a try. Okay, so yes, the quote stays in, the author stays in, category is not. And so let's add category. Let's say love. And this should be saved. Right? And it is saved. It is inserted. So if I come back, oops, quotes. Okay, yeah, if I come back, if I leave all of them blank, okay, well, all of them need to be entered. And what if I change author to be just something that breaks the rule? It should now tell me that it's too long. Okay, this field is too long. Okay, so there you have it. Of course, if I refresh, right, none of the error messages are there. The error messages are only there when we have entered something into the field. All right. So there you have it. That's our error validation. Now, there's a lot of things that as we go along, we will refactor, we will make better, right? So for example, you notice that we write a lot of, not here, but we write a lot of the error handling, the validation inside the handler, okay? And so if we do a lot of validation for a lot of fields, if your form has 10 fields, that's a lot of code. And so later on, we will refactor, and we will move validation errors out of the handler, right? Among other things as well. Like I mentioned, a lot of the code keeps repeating. Like for example, when you're going to parse and execute, a lot of the code repeats, right? So this is also a good client for refactoring, right? As well, I mentioned about the internal server errors, also another good client for refactoring, because we don't want to be writing too much repetitive code, and if we want to change a part of that code, then we have to go through every single handler and make that change. Okay, but so that's the idea of refactoring. But for this lesson, all I wanted you to understand was that we can handle errors. All right. So obviously, there was a few things, like for example, you notice that when we, right, if I hit enter, right, it still runs back and it runs to quote add. All right. Things like this we will eventually fix because we would want it to stay right here and not go in essence to quote add, since it was not a successful add. But those are minor things. We'll deal with that later on. For now, the big picture is this is back-end validation. Okay, so there is front-end validation and there is back-end validation. Front-end validation is when you use something like JavaScript to actually check the fields that the user has entered. Okay, but that does not prevent, front-end validation is not enough. It does not prevent someone from putting in data that should not be accepted. Okay, and that's the reason why you still need to do backend validation, because ultimately you don't want to trust the JavaScript or whatever. It will help, all right, but you still need to check, because ultimately if bad data can get in, then your database basically gets corrupted or gets destroyed. Okay, all right, so that's it. Again, we have to use a bit of CSS to differentiate. All right. I will see you in the next lesson where we move on to another area, right? Another key topic that you must know when it comes to building web applications. And I will say it again. From the beginning of the course, I did mention that we would build essentially everything from scratch. And the reason is because you need to know how everything works, so that at the end of this course, if you move on to some other course where they use a framework, such as Node.js or Laravel or Django, you will understand how to put together the web app, but more importantly, you know the right questions to ask. All right, and that's the key thing. What are the questions you need to ask when you're learning a framework? Because the framework will do a lot of things for you. Some of the things we do from scratch, the framework does that for you, saving you time. But again, if you don't know about all the code, you haven't done it all by yourself, then when you see all the code being generated for you in a framework, you will think it's magic. All right, I'll see you in the next lesson.